everyone. It's May 10th. I have a very special program today. It's not politics, but it is arts and entertainment. You know, all of us in our lives suffer disappointments, heartaches, loss, and grief. It's not unique, it happens to everyone. But not everyone undergoes a life altering, life changing experience that sets you back but makes you revive in a special way. And my guest has taken that life altering experience and turned it into a positive, uplifting, and inspiring story where he's helping other people and bringing his particular wonderful talents to everyone through his music. So let me introduce from New Jersey, Dave Schlossberg. Dave is a pianist, an accompanist to our fellow friend, Naomi Miller. He is accompanist to other groups. He's a composer. He's had CDs published, and now he's in the process of writing what we hope will be a Broadway show mounted for you to see. So, hi, Dave. Good to see you today. Okay. Let me ask you, Dave, do you want to tell us about your life altering experience when it happened?
Hello.
Hi. Do you want to tell us about your life altering experience and how it happened to you?
Sure. So my name is Dave, and basically, I'd say a little over 17 years ago, I was paralyzed by a drunk driver. I was driving home from a Friday night folk service at a temple at a synagogue where I worked, and I was stopped at a red light, and a woman came and hit me from behind. And I was the fourth car in a 5-car crash, and I it was of course one of the defining moments of my life, and it was a terribly traumatic experience for me. I lost all sensation below my chest level, as well as 8 broken ribs, a punctured lung, lacerated spleen, and other injuries. And 17 years later, here I am, but it's been a long road to get there.
Right. So before that accident happened to you, were you in college, Dave? And what were you studying? And what were your talents with working at the synagogue?
So I was in college. I was at that moment, I was a music major. I was studying piano performance. And I eventually, after the accident, went back to college. And once I was well enough, and I continued to get my bachelor's in piano performance. At the temple where I worked, and still do actually, I played Friday night services. I was the accompanist, the collaborative keyboard artist. I did a lot of work with the choirs, with arranging music for the band. At the time, I was doing special occasions like the spring concert. I was heavily involved, and since then, because I've continued to work there, once I was well enough to resume my duties there, I got more and more responsibilities. But it's the main point is that you're a synagogue accompanist, so wherever there's music, and in relation to either worship or or celebrations or services of any type, that's where you got to be.
So tell us about how your talent developed. Did you start piano at a very early age? Did you have a natural affinity for it? Did you need to take lessons? Tell us.
So I've been playing piano for 33 years. I started when I was 5. And I always tell people, back when I started, I wasn't that good. I was just a kid. And I had to, learn like everyone else. I ended up taking 10 years of what I would call unorthodox piano lessons. I kind of learned from, I did do typical kind of like, I would say like young piano student education books. So John W. Schaum has a series of uh, you know songs for beginners to play. So I did that stuff. But then when I mentioned unorthodox before, what ended up happening was I really found um, my niche, my curiosity peaked when it came to jazz and fake books and lead sheets and accompanying instrumentalists, not on the classical bent, but rather on a jazz bent, on a pop kind of styling, like all that kind of stuff. So the unorthodox part is that, instead of pursuing a classical kind of like um, course, I kind of was taught uh, basically how to read a fake book and then just let out into the world. And for those of you who know what a fake book is, it's basically the melodies with chords. So my instructor just told me, his name is Wally, Wally Selick. He was a very wonderful guy and a really formative. At a formative time in my life, he influenced me a lot. He would tell me, just he would teach me. He would kind of like answer my questions when it came to being curious about how to do things, how to do rhythmic and harmonic and melodic things, and the rest I kind of learned on the street. People would ask me to do gigs for them, to accompany shows, or to play for concerts and bar mitzvahs, weddings, surprise parties. And so through all that, like the crucible of my teenage years into my 20s and my 30s now, I've kind of developed a large range of like a large range of what I can accomplish at the piano. And I'd like to consider myself versatile, so that a lot of people do end up calling me for various kind of musical odd jobs, which I'm able to do. But yeah, so my piano training was very, it started out kind of like with the standard beginner stuff, but then it branched out into wherever my curiosity took me.
Okay. So let's go back to the accident, because it has played such a huge role in even what you're doing now, writing your show, which is really about what happened to you and the transformations. I know that your story was even written about in the New York Times on a series from people who had spinal cord injuries, as you did. So, do you want to talk about obviously the unbelievable feelings you had? You weren't even able to walk at first when you first had the accident. Do you want to describe your journey psychologically at that time?
Sure. The journey though is still going on. It's one that won't ever end. I never reached a point where I said, okay, I'm healed. But the psychological journey of suffering a spinal cord injury at the age of 21 is a very, very difficult and testing kind of journey. It really brings out in you these kind of base instinctual emotions that you have to learn to process. It's trauma, it's grief that you're dealing with. Early on in my journey, when I was in the hospital, I felt very animalized, if that's a word. I felt that I had been reduced to that of an animal, just trying to survive. And even though I know that other people have had things that have happened that have been much worse than mine, than my accident, and and I know that I do count my blessings. Psychologically, it's very difficult to feel that way when everything's been taken out immediately from under your feet in an instant. The floor drops out from under you, and you go in 1 second from someone who's completely independent to someone who relies on caregivers for basic needs, such as toileting, such as, um, you know, like even turning in bed to like they used to turn me so that I wouldn't get any pressure sores on my skin. These are all, it's a real psychological kind of like punch in the gut to have to acknowledge the realities of what happened, and how if you're going to recover, and what recovery looks like for you, those things cannot be fixed in a day. You have to play the long game. And for someone who was 21 at the time, with kind of like all my life ahead of me, I was very happy in my life. These kinds of emotions were very unwelcome and very terrifying.
Right. So, can you describe the evolution? Obviously, you went from the depths of despair and depression, as many do who suffer what you did, and yet you come out at the other end. Was it a roller coaster? Was it a gradual moving up, or did it
Uh,
go in waves? How did it go over, and how long did it take you to? I know you say you're still in it, but in terms of months, years, what are we talking about?
well, for me, my injury, it happened in January. I was out of rehab by May and back at home. By that time, I had learned to use a walker. Uh, However, I would say, in answer to your question, it's really a waves kind of thing. It's very much, you have peaks and valleys. There are some days where you feel great, just fantastic, and other days where you curse the name of the person that did this to you, and you are just an absolute wreck. You're in pain, you're uncomfortable, you just want the day to end and go back to bed. I would say that, as you mentioned, yes, I'm still in it. I do have moments of despair, moments of frustration. But I would say that maybe 6 or 7 years after the accident happened. So the accident happened in 2005. So we're talking 2011 or 2012. By that time, I kind of had a routine. I kind of had what I needed to kind of function, both mentally and physically, in a space where I felt satisfied, or um, at least good enough. I was comfortable with my life, probably around 6 to 7 years later. However, certain medical issues, psychological issues, they continued to plague me, and you have to decide to undergo treatment to get those fixed, or at least processed and worked on. So to that extent, it is an ongoing process, and I can't say that I've reached the end, but I would say, with some degree of confidence, that around 6 to 7 years later, I kind of got most of my life back in a way that I could kind of look toward the future instead of looking back.
Okay, so just a couple of thoughts while you were talking that I wanted to ask you about. What did you make of the fact that I think you said your arms, your hands you were always able to use them despite the accident? Is that a sign, do you think? Is there something mystical in a way about that? And then the other thought that I want you to address is, I've written things you've said, you've written about having lost some faith in God itself, in your Jewish faith and heritage, but you have kind of overcome that. You want to talk about those?
Sure. So, with respect to your first question, you had asked about the use of my arms and hands and whether I thought that was a sign. Um, Several people in my life are, really religious, and they think that it was a sign that I needed to, that my hands and arms needed to be saved in order for me to continue my career of making music. As for me personally, I tend to side much more with the randomness of things, and I it's helpful to kind of to think of it as the fact that just by the luck of the draw, that I was able to, recover things, because I don't want to feel like I've deserved to be saved, or to deserve to have my livelihood saved more than someone else. I just feel like I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And within that context, I did get very lucky that the injury wasn't any higher. That said, I do thank God every day for what I've recovered and what I still have, and the and the good that I can still do, because I still have my mind and my hands, and the ability to play piano, and I still use my foot to hit the sustain pedal, even though it's the left foot and not the right. I also drive with the left foot as well. But to answer your question more succinctly, I find it comforting to believe that I was just lucky, because I don't want to. In essence, it's really not about what's happened to me, but rather what I'm able to do after it happens, how I'm able to bounce back. And in my particular case, I hold more stock, and I'm more proud of that part of it than considering myself, blessed that I got injured where I did, and to the severity that I did. So that's one thing. Now, the other question you were asking was, what was it again? Sorry.
Well, I was asking you about the fact that you started to doubt God and
Yeah.
his presence in your life.
So, with respect to my belief in God, yes, there were moments when I doubted God, and fairly recently there was a moment where I was having a really bad day, and medically wise, and I went out into the rain, and I looked up into the sky, and I just talked to God, and I asked God, why did this happen to me? Now, in terms of my belief in God, I prefer not to kind of like make some statement, some general statement about whether there is a God or whether there isn't. I don't. I'm not interested in that. But I will say the following. This I can confirm, that as I got better, as I recovered more, I began to believe that God had given me the opportunities and the resources. Uh, so so I kind of recovered I kind of avoided, I mentally decided to avoid the question of why did this happen. In my musical, I actually, which we'll talk about, one of the characters says, don't ask why this happened, ask what happens now. What happens now? And so I kind of, I don't think it was a laziness thing, or an unwillingness to to confront my whether I believed in God or whether I didn't, but rather I consciously chose not to deal with that aspect. I think that my faith is expressed through my music, and to the extent that I was able to recover so much of it, I believe that I have recovered my faith. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It does. Before we go on to talk about your music and your composing and your show, I just want to summarize, what is the state of your health now in terms of what you are capable of doing and what your limitations still are? Can you just explain that?
So, in terms of right now, what I'm capable of doing, I'm capable of driving on my own. I'm capable of walking across the street on my own, which was a huge psychological hurdle that I had for many years. I would usually walk across the street with a walker, but I learned to do so with a cane. And that is, one of my biggest, the things that I'm most proud of. my current state is that, I do have some body function issues, if you could call it that. I mean, what you're dealing with in a spinal cord injury is nerve signals that are kind of like messed up, if not cut off, going from the brain to the rest of the body. So from here, you can see this is kind of like my heart level. From here down, I've always had sensory and mobility issues. And that was a given. And with that comes, body stuff, like the stuff that they don't talk about, like random pain, some issues with, let's just say, your nervous system, your digestive system, your excretory system. These are all things that, in the wonderful grab bag of spinal cord injury, they still happen. And, I'm well aware that as I get older, these things might become more prevalent in my life. That said, though, I would say on a regular basis, the most that I count myself very, very lucky in this manner. On a regular basis, in this respect, I don't have that much, quote unquote, pain on a daily basis. However, I do experience, difficulties with like activities of daily living. I shouldn't say that. In other words, just bladder issues, bowel issues, body functions, all that stuff that, like I said, they don't tell you about. It's kind of stuff that isn't easily fixable, just because the issues are very much, like it's a neurological injury that I've suffered. So because of that, these are things I'll be dealing with a long time. But from a physical standpoint and a mental standpoint, I think I'm doing fairly well.
Right, because you're able to sustain performances and when you're accompanying people and you're able to do your work. And so, as I mentioned in the introduction, you're using your experience and through your music, you're expressing your faith in the world, in God, even in the randomness of it all, as you put it. And you're also using your music to write a Broadway show, hopefully, and also to give advice to others. I know that you've have a lecture. Is that right, Dave? That you've
Yes.
given to others who suffered some of the same experiences you have, because you feel that you can inspire them to overcome their despair and depression. Right? Tell about that.
So one of the things that I really take to heart is that I feel very ordinary in many ways. I feel like when the accident happened, I behaved as as a human being would. I didn't, when I was in rehab, I didn't strut across the rehab facility saying, I'm going to learn to walk, I'm going to do it, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I was scared. I didn't want to be in pain. I cried throughout rehab. I screamed. I was uncomfortable. I wasn't this glorified figure. And so I'm telling you this because I think that the way I dealt with the accident and the humanity with which I handled it, the moments of weakness I had, the moments of determination I've had, the failures, the strengths, everything like that, it makes my story really compelling. And I know that there are many motivational speakers who kind of try and like talk themselves up as this, person who was at their lowest and then somehow climbed up and, succeeded, overcame. For me, I kind of like put all that to the side. For me, I'm just this guy who was put in an impossible situation, and I reacted how any, how what I thought like a normal human being would react. I was scared, I was terrified, I was in pain, and I didn't go into this try and recover seeking glory. I came to it I came into it trying to avoid more pain and basically rotting away in my hospital bed because I was given the opportunity and the resources and the luck to make that happen. So all this is to say that when I give lectures, I focus a lot on the universality of my story, the fact that it could happen to anybody. And not only does something like this happen in an instant, to rich, to poor, to black, to white, to anybody, not only that, but that it's okay. My message is that it's okay to be scared. It's okay. And you just got to push through anyway, and do what you can, and to be kind to yourself. So I do a lecture which explains a little bit about what spinal cord injury is, and then I talk about my journey through rehab, as well as where I am today. But I make clear that my story, I believe that it is compelling simply because I behave in ways that are human. I don't try and sugarcoat things. I just behave in ways that are human and that are honest. So I want to, in addition to talking about the dangers of drunk driving, I talk about the resilience of the human spirit, and I try and get across the point that this determination that I showed, and the kind of inner strength that I had to get where I am today, is something that anybody can access.
Right. So the other side of the coin is lecturing and helping other people to get through what you went through, but also highlighting that experience and probably sending that same lesson to people through your music. And tell us why you decided to write a Broadway musical about your experience. Is it something that is enlightening and helpful to you, or does it sometimes dredge up some of the pain and grief that you wanted to overcome?
Catharsis. It's all
Yeah.
about catharsis. I originally did not. The idea to write a musical about my story was suggested to me by a friend. It wasn't something that I came up with. However, as I considered what she was saying to me, I did believe that my story was worth telling, and I thought that it was a really creative intersection of my skill set. As a musician, as a composer, as an arranger, as someone who knows how to write music, and who has that aspect. And I mean, I'm not going to say I'm a professional Broadway composer, but I will say, I've played a bunch of musical theater, and I kind of have some skill in that area. That combined with my ability to tell my story through these lectures, and the universal appeal of my story, I think all those three things combined to make it an endeavor that I jumped into with my whole heart. I'm very passionate about the musical, even though some details are changed. I mean, you got to take some dramatic license,
Sure.
some liberties, but the general story is there. And as I've been working on it over the years with my team, there have been moments that have really spoken to me personally, things that have been written, songs that I've composed. It's something that I feel will always give me catharsis. It'll always be there to give me perspective on how far I've come. And as years go by and I see this, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, the lessons I learn will be different. But I'm very proud of having created something that I think can be of service to me throughout my life, and a lot of people throughout theirs.
Right. So before we get you to play us something from your show, I just wanted to ask you about the other side of the coin from you, and that is the drunk driver who created the accident and who you made part of your play, right? You gave that drunken driver, she's a woman in the play, and I guess in real life too, and you gave her a prominent role in the play. Can you just describe the evolution of your thoughts regarding her?
Sure. Sheila, I always wanted to include her in my heart. I always wanted her to be a part of my story because deep down I realized that what she did to me, the irresponsibility that she displayed in getting drunk and hitting me and causing my life-changing injury, it could happen to anybody. It could happen to me if I'm not paying attention behind the wheel. There's a lot of luck involved. So this 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 concept of her as kind of almost on my level, a human too, that kind of thing. It Even though it's been in my deepest, the deepest part of my soul, even though that's been my feeling, rationally, it's hard to keep alive sometimes. Some days I think that she's the worst person in the world. I curse her name, as I mentioned before. I don't want. I wanted to bury her. I want to, just bury that part of my life. I don't want to give her, a space in my head. These kinds of feelings, and that, of course, is correlated to my anxiety, my health situation in that current day. That said, I made her and the kind of other protagonist. You could say the antagonist, but there are two main characters in the play, one based on me and one based on her. And in the musical, the two characters live separate lives in the first act, and then the accident happens at the end of the first act, and then it shows in the next act their journey, how they react, and that kind of thing. So I thought this was really important. I knew the show couldn't simply be about me, because I felt like, I don't know where I heard it, but I remember hearing somewhere that every every villain has a story. They're just, they have their own story. It's not like they were born bad. Something happened. Like, they have their own lives, their own story, their own regrets, their own journey to take. And I wanted to illustrate that in the show, to get across the idea that nothing is black and white. And coming from me, someone who has lived his life since the accident, kind of protecting myself by thinking of things in that way, that I was a hero and she was a villain, and there's nothing in between. Not even a hero, that I was an innocent person and she was, the guilty one. That's what I mean. Coming from someone who feels that way, me making a point to blur the lines between black and white, good and bad, and to give humanity to a person that other people might not think deserves it. I thought that was a very powerfully healing move for me to make, and a necessary one as well, because by doing so, by giving a story to a person who I didn't want to hear anything from, didn't want to see, didn't want to talk about, just want to move on, to give her the humanity, the story, the kind of airtime, the space in my head, rent free, that she's living in. It was very freeing for me, because I kind of was able to access my ability to forgive her, which still is a work in progress, but it's opened more doors for me to be able to put that on stage than it would have to just have forgotten about her.
Very, very, very interesting, very enlightening to hear that, Dave. So now, I'd love you to play us something from the show. Just set it up briefly, and then you can share that with us with your piano.
Sure, absolutely. So I will let's see. If I go like this, you can.
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
great.
We can
So
you
this
can see
song
you.
is the opening song of the show. It's entitled "Life Behind the Wheel." The main character's name is Isaac, and Isaac is, of course, based off me. My middle name is Yitzchak in Hebrew, which is Isaac in English. So I figured it was a nice name. Although, rhyming with Isaac is a little hard, but I got around that. But anyway, the point is, Isaac at the beginning of the show is just like me, an itinerant musician, someone who basically spends his days gigging. He gets up early in the morning and runs. He kind of like throws on clothes, packs his keyboard in his car, makes himself a quick breakfast, and runs out the door and is doing rehearsals and concerts all day. And that's kind of my life. This story focuses on Isaac during a typical day, and he sings about, how he feels about his life, this life that he lives, where his mother tells him that, he should be teaching or doing some kind of more steady work, but he really loves his life, foibles aside, he really enjoys his life. And so this is kind of like my personal motto of a song, because I believe it, I live it, I wrote it and I live it. And it's validating when another musician who hears it says, I get this song and I feel it too, because what this is it's a universal statement of what it's like to be on the road all day and to live a crazy life, but still find joy because of the work, the love of the work you do. It justifies the chaos. So you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Good. Go ahead.
Here we go. It's a sunny morning and I'll soon be on my way. Gotta make those donuts, as they say. Mom says that I do well to teach and not just play. I might consider that another day, but not today. I've got the tools I need right here in my back seat. My keyboard and my amp are tucked in nice and neat. And in the front I've got some breakfast yet to eat. A day like this just can't be beat. Some may think I'm nuts and that my job is not legit. A 9-to-5 gig off on weekends sounds quite normal, I'll admit. The work's not steady, but I've got it good from where I sit. My career as a pianist is ideal. It's how I see my life behind the wheel. I would never claim to be a planning type of guy. In my car it's easy to see why. Sheet music everywhere, no matter how I try. I know if my father saw it, he would cry. My mom would die. I'll never tell them of the food I eat en route. Oftentimes it ends up on my suit. If my parents scold me, well, I proudly will refute. Things like this are part of my commute. When you drive all day, you find a way to make it work. And yes, I know that living like this is my least endearing quirk. And I am not the neatest, but at least I'm not a jerk. The chaos is a part of the appeal. It's how I see my life behind the wheel. And sometimes things don't go quite right. I've shown up at 8 a.m. when call time's 8 at night. And leaving my rehearsal binder in the kitchen by the coffee grinder is a very firm reminder of my kryptonite. Planning, being a pianist, well, it's not a piece of cake. Your success depends upon the effort that you make. If you don't concentrate, you're bound to make mistakes. Musicianship is hard to fake. Even if my biggest flaw is learning how to plan. I always put the time in, and I play the best I can. My talent and my diligence is what people demand. I focus on how I can make them feel. It's how I see my life behind the wheel. Sometimes I wonder as the days and weeks go by, is it true happiness I've found? They think that I should have ambition, to be sure. To them I'm standing on the ground. They think that I should be reaching for the sky. The fact that I'm content here seems quite strange. If I'm hell-bent on making people feel good, it's time well spent. I know I'm doing real good. Music helps humanity to heal. Good luck getting me to change. It's a sunny morning and I must get on my way. Gotta make those donuts as they say. Whoa, first a rehearsal, then 2 concerts yet to play. Just another satisfying day. Music is my mission, that's a fact I can't deny. An itinerant musician doesn't need to wonder why. If it's not an imposition, let me do this till I die. And that for me would be an awesome deal. It's how I see my life behind the wheel. Now, here's the honest truth, because I don't live in denial. My job won't make me rich, but that's okay, it's not my style. I'll gladly drive my beat-up car and eat up every mile. It's worthwhile, cause my happiness is real. It's how I live my life behind the wheel.
Great. That's great, Dave. The piano music really echoed a wheel. I really loved the way it felt. Very moving. So that's the beginning, and I can see it. And then from there, you go through the accident and the next act and so forth. And it's very nice. So you're working now on trying to mount it for a workshop, so you can get people involved to.
Yes, right now we're considering some proposals from some general management companies, and if we like what the contract says, we'll go ahead and sign on. The goal, I want to mention that you call this a Broadway musical. I mean, it is a Broadway style musical. It could go on Broadway conceivably. The way I've written it and my team with me. That said, my goal is not necessarily to get it to Broadway, although that would be really nice. My goal is simply to see it staged, and with that, to inspire others. Wherever other people end up taking it, if they take it further than having it staged in a kind of like a performing arts venue or whatever, a small time performing arts venue, that doesn't matter to me. It really is about having the opportunity to tell my story in a way that can connect with others. And for me, speaking in a lecture situation and pointing at a PowerPoint, that's very different. It's a very different skill set from being able to make and craft a story with characters that kind of transcend the whole dynamic of me speaking to others, but rather people can see themselves on stage in different capacities. For example, my parents who are in the show, not my real parents being in the show, but I've modeled Isaac's parents after my own. Those characters, they hit some pretty emotional touchstones in their reaction to Isaac's injury and accident. And my great joy would be to see parents in the audience identify with those characters and see themselves in them. Like you said at the beginning of the interview, everyone's had some kind of tragedy or misfortune or adversity affect them, And so my goal and my joy would be to see that people are connecting through characters like my parents, and the way they've reacted in the show to the way the audience reacts in their own lives. You know what I mean?
Sure. So that's great, David. We wish you the best of luck with moving forward with your show.
Thank you.
I want to have you toward the end. We're getting to the end of our program. I want you to play something as we are getting leave. But before we do, let's just look at a few images and photos, things that you sent me that I found that will be interesting for people to look at. Okay.
Sure.
So we're going to show can you see that, Dave?
Yes.
There you are. Dave Schlossberg, pianist, composer, again, Broadway musical creative, because we think of everything that might go to Broadway as a Broadway musical. I think it's just an overall generic term. Doesn't necessarily mean you're actually on 42nd Street, right? But
When I
hopefully
do,
we'll
when
get
I
there.
am, I will let you know, and you'll get a front row
Absolutely.
seat.
Absolutely. Thank you. There you are. This is a publicity photo in front of your piano,
Yes.
right? Yeah. And now this was, wow. Describe that. Wow.
So this is my car. It's a Saturn Ion. This is, of course, where I was on January 21st, 2005, at around 9:30 at night on Route 1 in North Brunswick, New Jersey.
It's so amazing, Dave, that you said it was a 5-car crash, and you would think the power and the force. How many miles an hour was the?
She was going 55.
Wow.
With a blood alcohol of 0.229. So that's almost 3 times the legal limit.
Wow.
I didn't even hear any brakes. I didn't hear, I don't remember hearing any brakes. She just wasn't paying attention. Maybe she was asleep behind the wheel, or she was just looking away, or whatever the case may be. This is what she did to my car. They
Now
had to extract me.
Yeah, they had to extract you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She did get some prison time after a trial, didn't she?
Yeah, she, as far as I can remember, she was in jail for 12 months, or no, 10 months, and lost her license for a year, at which point she was released. And then I lost track of her until she reached out through Facebook Messenger. That's another story, though. You can imagine how I felt after almost 16 years, seeing this ghost from my past send me a message trying to apologize. But that is my car, and I used to not be able to look at it, but now I kind of focus on how far I've come since then.
Right. Well, some people might argue that the sentence was not long enough for what. Were there other people who were as damaged as you were in the accident?
One person, I recall, they told me that one person broke their arm, and she also had a fractured orbital bone, but she wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and I was. Okay. So beyond that, though, besides another person having a broken arm, I don't think that anyone else suffered that severely.
Do you want to say how you reacted to her reaching out to you all those years later?
Sure. I mean, I'm open with this. When I received, it was actually on the very day, Sheila, that I finished the first draft of the show, or that the team did. Mm-hmm. And so it was, I was riding high. I felt really good. And then I got this message from her, and it was basically along the lines of, I know you may not want to talk to me, but I just want to let you know I'm sorry, et cetera, et cetera. And my reaction was, I'm not lying, I cried hysterically, uncontrollably sobbing. I curled into a ball on my bed, and you couldn't even like talk to me for the next hour, because I was just so blown away, because I thought that she had buried me. Like, I thought that she had buried me and moved on. And I thought that she would never understand that I dealt with this and deal with this every day. And I would always say to myself, like, I wonder if she's ever thinking of me, and then she actually wrote in her message to me that she did, and that she thinks about me all the time. And so to me, it was as if I got a part of my life back, honestly, because to know that she remembered me, and that I wasn't, that even though in her moment of irresponsibility, she destroyed so much of my life. It's the equivalent of having someone, put flowers on your grave. You know what I mean?
Right.
They through that letter, she told me that I wasn't forgotten, that she did have, that she did care for me in some way, that I wasn't just a ghost that she wanted to exorcise, that I was
Yeah.
a part of her life, that she acknowledged, and that meant a lot,
Yeah.
because I've undergone, or I had undergone a whole kind of like cruel extraction of my selfhood, my personhood, through this accident. As I said, I was animalized and all that. So to have her kind of give me a little bit of my personhood and my identity back, it was very powerful.
Wow. And so, where were you in the line of five? You obviously hit from the front and the behind, right? Where were you
No,
in the
no.
line? No?
It was five cars in a row. She was the fifth. She rear-ended me, and what you see in
Ah,
the front is me
well,
hitting the
okay.
third
Yeah,
car.
there you go. Right, got it. Wow. Well, as you said, and as you probably put into your play, she went through an evolution of her feelings as well.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. Wow. Um, there you are. What's
Yeah. Um, I would never be caught dead with that phone today, but uh, that's how it used to be. I don't know if you remember that, Sheila.
yeah.
Um, this is me in rehab. Some of my first steps, I was able to kind of grab onto the railing, and I felt comfortable enough to put one leg in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. You may notice the beard. I
Uh-huh.
tell people that I never grew a beard so much until I was in rehab, because I had this dramatic idea that as long as I was a prisoner in rehab, I wanted to look like one. So, I had this beard and I was proud of it, and it made me feel, grizzled and veteran-y. And then one day I was working out on the mat in the gym, and some of my hairs got caught in the mat. And from that moment on, I'm like, I'm shaving this thing. Uh, but, in general, this was a very formative and emotional moment for me,
Mhm.
because I realized that if I got that back, I could somehow recover more. And it was by then less a function of luck, what signals
Yeah.
end up getting through, and more a function of my own effort.
Tell me, Dave, from the moment of the accident, how long was it before you went back to play the piano?
To play the piano,
Yeah.
personally, um, I when I was in the hospital, the first night, or rather the second, like a couple days later, my parents brought in my a little portable keyboard that I can put on my
Wow.
hospital bed.
Wow. I would, yeah.
Even though I couldn't, play I couldn't use the pedal or anything like that, I could entertain nurses who came in, and that
Wow.
to me was very, um, it was affirming. And then when I went to therapy, uh, I'm sorry, rehab, there was a piano in the foyer, in the like this main lobby area, which I would play to entertain the guests. And I think you have a picture of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is me. Um, I kind of playfully resent this picture, because my choir, one of the choirs that I work with, called Makelat HaMerkaz, which in Hebrew means the central choir. This is the Jewish choir of central New Jersey. I had been with them for like 4 years before that. And when my accident happened, they arranged to come up and sing for me. Um, and I always playfully resent this picture, because I was the only one who could accompany them because they had no other accompanists. So even though it was a concert in honor of me in Kessler for the residents, I was still working, which was okay because at the time I wanted to be out there performing again, and I knew that I was capable of accompanying them. But I will always be grateful to them for thinking of me in that way and wanting to surprise me.
All right. And now this was when?
This is fairly recently. It's I would say maybe 7 or 8 years ago. This is me in doing one of the things that I do today. And by the way, I am still with Maquilata Merkaz, as well as this group, which I just came from right before this interview, a chorus rehearsal in the very same room that you see in this. This is the Monroe Township Chorus. And to my left is Sheila Horvitz. She is the woman who is the director, and I'm the musical director. And so this is a bunch of active adults, you'd say seniors, in Monroe. They are 60 strong, 50 to 60 people, and they are in this particular picture. We're rehearsing for one of our shows, but for the past 6 or 7 years, we've put on shows at the Marasco Theater, also here in Monroe, the Marasco Performing Arts Center, and it's been great. But I really enjoy, among all my other pursuits, to teach choruses and to use my unique skills and repertoire to bring them joy and to help them bring others joy.
And this is, you have a CD called The Place Beyond Words.
Yes, this is it.
Okay. I think we'll ask you to play something from that perhaps as we wrap up. Okay.
Sure.
That'll be great. And now
Absolutely.
This is how you, part of your lecture series, and right? This is one example of a notice of a series, How I Regained My Faith After a Life-Changing Injury.
One thing I want to draw your attention to is you see in the actual description, it says, to make the spinal cord injury he suffered at the hands of a drunk driver, not a symbol of victimhood, but instead a source of strength. Mm-hmm. That's one of the themes of my lecture. The fact that victimhood is really, it's an okay thing to be involved in and to feel for a while, but at some point you have to choose to overcome that. I used to think that when I first started doing these lectures, I thought that victimhood was, a bad word, that, you never want to behave in your life like a victim. But since I've undergone, a lot of psychological, treatment and therapy, and they've helped me realize that victimhood has its place. In the beginning of my injury, feeling like a victim was powerful, and it was comforting in a world that was really, all about pain and discomfort. Because being a victim and having a villain and being an innocent person in all this made me feel, great and like I was a hero and like I was innocent, and it gave me some sense of identity. But now in the intervening years, I've learned to kind of transcend the sense of victimhood and turn it into a sense of survivorship, which is where I am now.
Okay, great. So let's come back to the conclusion. Before I ask you to help us end the program by playing something for us, is there anything you would most like to say? Anything else any thoughts you have that you would most like to leave us with?
Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us on this interview. If I could have one message transmitted to all those who are watching, it would just be careful out there. Drunk driving and distracted driving, to me, they're one and the same. Don't be distracted behind the wheel. Take care of yourselves and acknowledge that you are stronger than you think. And even if adversity happens in your life, and grief and pain and fear, even if all those things happen to you, you are strong. You are brave, and treat yourself with respect. Treat yourself as an incredible human being who's going on a journey. Be able to forgive yourself, and take care of yourselves and take care of your fellow human beings. We're all trying to do what we can. So just be safe.
Great. So tell us, what are you going to play for us now?
So this CD is basically piano renditions of Jewish melodies of a liturgical nature. It's called A Place Beyond Words. It's available on Spotify, Amazon, and also on my website, www.daveschlossberg.com. Basically, the very, very short version of this is, after all this time as a synagogue pianist, accompanying service after service, I realized that some of these songs that we all sing in my synagogue, they're really good songs on their own, and they deserve a piano improvisation. So what's fun about this is the improvisations on here are different than the improvisations I'm going to do for you right now, because it's all improvisation.
They're improvisations, right?
This is an award-winning album. It won the Silver Medal for Outstanding Achievement from the Global Music Awards in 2017, also being listed as one of their top albums of 2017.
Great.
So what I'm going to play for you now is the first track, Vishamru, which is basically a fairly well-known Jewish song. Basically, the Hebrew means, and you don't play in Hebrew, you play in music. People say to me, I don't feel comfortable listening to it because it's Jewish music, it's in Hebrew. I said, no, I play in piano, in the language of piano. So you can be whatever faith and still enjoy it. But the Hebrew is basically about that you should guard keep the Sabbath, that kind of thing. So this is a very famous arrangement, a famous song written originally by Moshe Rothblum, Rabbi Moshe Rothblum, and I'll perform it for you now.
Great.
Okay, let me move this down so you can see the
there you
piano.
go. We want to see the piano, right?
Okay, great.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. It was great having you as a guest. People will be able to watch you on the Comcast TV stations um, in the Norwich, Connecticut area, in Eastern Connecticut. They'll be also able to watch you on Facebook, and this will be transferred to YouTube, and people will be sending them out to you and others.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, and we'll see you all next time on Talkback. Bye. Bye, Dave.